Have you ever felt like the people who raised you are the same ones quietly trying to erase you? That's what happened to me. One morning, sipping coffee on my porch at Whispering Pines, the cabin I spent 12 years rebuilding from ruin, I got a message saying the property had been sold. My name was on the documents, but I hadn't signed anything. Turns out my own family forged my signature. The people who once leaned on me for help were now trying to take everything I built. But here's the part no one talks about. Sometimes justice doesn't show up in courtrooms. It shows up when you stop apologizing for choosing yourself. I turned that betrayal into boundaries, filed charges, took back what was mine. Now, Whispering Pines isn't just a retreat. It's proof that peace doesn't come from keeping quiet. It comes from reclaiming your voice. And if you've ever felt like you're the one holding the family together at your own expense, this story is for you. Before we dive into the story, let's connect. Have you ever felt stuck, searching for the depths of manifestation? Drop a 3 in the comments if you're ready to unlock your true potential, or a 4 if you're still finding your way. Let's start this journey together. The morning fog curled low over the lake, gentle as a breath. It clung to the treetops and hung in the quiet space between the porch and the water. I stood barefoot on the worn cedar boards, a mug of coffee warming my hands, the last loaf of sourdough cooling just inside the kitchen window. Out here, at Whispering Pines, time felt slower. Not stuck, just still, like a deep inhale that never needed to end. 12 years ago, I bought this land with a savings account barely above zero and a heart full of stubbornness. The cabin was a ruin. Holes in the roof, raccoons in the loft, rot in every board. Everyone told me to tear it down. I didn't. I drew up blueprints by candlelight and spent weekends hauling salvage wood and scrubbing mold from the floors. I patched the roof with tarp that first winter, fingers numb and breath visible in the air. That first Christmas, I had nothing but a folding chair and a camp stove. But the solitude was its own kind of gift. No one calling, no one needing. Just the forest, the wind, and the slow realization that peace doesn't arrive. It's built. My journal was open on the table beside me, a pen resting across the spine. I'd just written a line about the way the fog made the pines look like ghosts when my phone buzzed. Ryan, video call. I let it ring once, twice. Then I sighed and answered. Claire! He grinned, his face taking up the screen like he'd been waiting all day for this pitch. Okay, I've got something. Just listen. His hair was longer than I remembered, curling at the edges. He was wearing one of those hoodies that cost more than most people's car payments. So it's called GlowGo, he said, practically vibrating. Imagine a crypto-backed wellness ecosystem. You meditate, journal, take your vitamins. Boom, you earn tokens. Those tokens get you stuff. Yoga retreats, nootropic kits, sauna memberships. It's spiritual growth meets financial independence. Let me guess, I said. You need investors. He chuckled. Only 20 grand to start. You know I'd come to you last if I had other options. But Claire, seriously, this is going to change the game. You're all about holistic living. This fits you. I raised an eyebrow. GlowGo fits me? You live in a cabin, bake your own bread, grow herbs. You're halfway to a guru already. That's called self-reliance, Ryan, not blockchain. Before he could answer, the screen split again. My mother had joined. Her face was perfectly framed, pearl earrings gleaming against her cheekbones. She didn't say hello. Claire, she began, cool and clipped, don't dismiss your brother so quickly. He's trying. I closed my eyes briefly. I'm not dismissing him. I just don't think crypto is the path to enlightenment. Barbara's voice went soft, which was never a good sign. You've always managed with less, but you have more now. Don't you think it's time to give back? I felt the familiar prick of old guilt. I've already given plenty, Mom. Sometimes, she said, tilting her head, I think you stay up in that cabin just to avoid us. I laughed, dry. Sometimes, I think you say things like that to make sure I do. She smiled then, the way people do when they think they've won. Family means sacrifice, Claire. You'll understand when it's too late. The call ended without warning. I didn't call back. By noon, I was elbow deep in flour, sourdough for the weekend guests. My hands moved with memory, folding and pressing, letting the rhythm wash over the last 30 minutes. Then my phone buzzed again, a group text. Barbara, Ryan, Dad. Family means sacrifice, Claire. You'll understand when it's too late. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. No explanation, no request. Just a line meant to sound like love but felt more like a warning. That night, after dinner was prepped and the last window shut against the early autumn chill, I opened the drawer where I kept my documents, birth certificate, tax records, and there, in a labeled folder, the deed to Whispering Pines. I checked it twice. My name, my signature. Dated, notarized, filed. Still, something in my mother's tone had planted a seed. I made copies, one printed, one digital. The printed one went into a locked metal box in the pantry, next to the backup flashlight and emergency crank radio. The digital copy got uploaded to my cloud drive and sent to Savannah, an old college friend who now worked in estate law, just in case. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the pines until they whispered again. I stepped onto the porch and pulled my cardigan tighter. Somewhere out there, my family was planning something, or maybe nothing. But either way, the silence between us had changed. I opened my journal and wrote, when the people who gave you life try to take something from it, what part of you do they erase first? And for the first time in months, I didn't know the answer. Some families talk in code. Mine preferred silence, sharpened into guilt. Thanksgiving at the Whitman house hadn't changed much since I left for college. Same imitation fireplace flickering in the corner, same over-polished dining table creaking under too much food, same smell of dried sage, reheated gravy, and forced politeness. The kind of holiday gathering where you measure affection in who gets past the rolls first, and criticism in how long the pauses stretch after someone speaks. Ryan was already 3 drinks in by the time I arrived. His voice carried from the living room, loud, charming, practiced. I paused in the hallway, taking in the rows of his framed awards that lined the mantel. High school debate trophies, Entrepreneur of the Month plaques, a glossy photo of him shaking hands with a state senator I couldn't name, my baby brother, the golden child. Barbara emerged from the kitchen in a beige sweater set, her lipstick perfect, her tone tight. "Claire," she said, leaning in for a kiss that barely brushed my cheek. "You look tired. Are you eating enough out there?" "Good to see you too, Mom." She ushered me toward the dining room, her hand light but firm on my back. Gregory was already seated, nursing a scotch and staring at the centerpiece like it might offer a safe exit. I gave him a gentle smile. He nodded, the kind of nod that asked not to be pulled into anything. Dinner began with the usual grace and Gregory's annual half-hearted toast about gratitude and resilience. The turkey was dry. The tension wasn't. "So," Ryan said, carving into his plate with too much enthusiasm, Glogo just got a feature on a mid-tier tech podcast, Traffic Spiking. We're beta testing a feature that tracks your mood using biometric feedback. Barbara beamed. "Ryan's team is so innovative. It's really impressive the way he's harnessing wellness and technology." I smiled politely and reached for the cranberry sauce. "You know," Ryan added, turning to me, "you could still get in." Founders Round closes next quarter. "Claire, seriously, it's dumb to let your money rot in trees." I bit back the reply forming in my throat. "Whispering Pines isn't rotting. I'm booked through March. Guests come to breathe, to unplug." He laughed. "It's a glorified Airbnb for introverts." Barbara dabbed her mouth. "You're not getting any younger, Claire. You could do something bigger, more lasting, with that land." Gregory cleared his throat but said nothing. I pushed the stuffing around my plate. My chest tightened. This wasn't new. Years ago, I paid Ryan's bail after a bar fight in grad school. Co-signed on one of Dad's failed property ventures, an investment opportunity that turned into a sinkhole of debt. They never talked about those things. They just happened, and somehow I was always expected to make things right. My phone buzzed in my lap. I glanced down, grateful for the interruption. An email. Subject: Title Transfer Inquiry. 24 Whispering Pines Lane. No sender, just a link. My throat went dry. I clicked the link. It opened a bare-bones PDF. Some kind of inquiry about a potential transfer of ownership. No names attached, no official stamps. Just enough to make the hairs on my arms rise. I looked up. Barbara was slicing pie with the precision of a surgeon. Ryan was pouring himself another drink. No one noticed I'd gone quiet. "Excuse me," I said, rising. "I need some air." No one stopped me. The cold hit me the moment I stepped onto the porch. Oregon air in November doesn't ask permission. It just seeps into your bones. I shut the door behind me and pulled out my phone. Savannah picked up on the second ring. "Hey," she said, her voice warm despite the static. "Happy Thanksgiving. Everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "Did you get a chance to look into that property protection clause we talked about?" There was a pause. "Claire, did something happen?" "I just got an email," I said. "Someone's sniffing around my deed. I don't know who, but I have a bad feeling." Another pause. "Send me everything. Tonight. I'll dig." In the background, I could hear laughter, probably her family's dinner. The sound made my throat ache. "Thanks," I whispered. "I owe you." "No," she said. "You don't. But we're going to figure this out." I ended the call and stood there for a moment, arms wrapped tight around myself. Behind me, I could hear the clinking of forks and muffled voices. Inside, my family was already carving me up, just not with words. They didn't need to say it out loud. Their silence did the work. There's a moment when you stop trying to protect their feelings and start protecting what's yours. It was a Tuesday morning, and Portland was doing its usual impression of a soaked sponge. Gray mist clung to the sidewalks as I trudged through puddles toward Savannah's office downtown. My flannel stuck to my arms, damp with the kind of rain that didn't fall so much as hang in the air like judgment. Savannah's building stood crisp against the blur of the city, clean glass, metal lines, modern calm. Inside, her office was its own quiet world. Warm wood panels, woven rugs, shelves lined with thick legal volumes, and a jade plant that had clearly never missed a watering. She looked up from her laptop with that calm, capable smile. "You brought it?" I handed over the printout of the email, the one with the impersonal subject line, title Transfer Inquiry 24 Whispering Pines Lane, and the PDF that still made my stomach twist. She didn't skim. Savannah read every word like it was a witness on the stand. There's no contact name, no agency. And look here, this timestamp's off. It was routed through a Canadian IP address. "So not real," I said, more as a prayer than a conclusion. "Not legal," she corrected, "but real enough to scare someone who doesn't know better." I exhaled slowly, the way you do when you've been holding your breath for weeks without noticing. Savannah folded the printout. "They're fishing. Someone wants to see how close they can get to the line. And I want to build a fence," I said, "a tall one." She gave a nod, subtle but approving. "Then let's do it right." For the next hour, she guided me through setting up Whispering Pines Retreat, LLC. I transferred personal ownership of the land to the company. It was mostly digital paperwork, but it felt heavier than anything I'd ever signed. My name moved from one line to another, from individual to entity. On paper, it was just a legal strategy. In my chest, it felt like closing a door with a lock only I had the key to. "I'll open a new business account under the LLC," she said, clicking through the bank setup screen. "Make sure any deposits or charges go through this routing number from now on. Cleaner trail, less exposure." I nodded, watching my past dissolve and reshape in real time. She clicked, "Submit." That one sound made something settle in me. Not relief, not exactly, but clarity. Savannah leaned back in her chair, tea cooling on her desk. Now comes the unglamorous part, protecting the infrastructure. You'll need off-site backups of your bookings and contracts, 2-factor logins, and if it's in the budget, a security camera at the cabin trailhead. I blinked. You think it's that serious? She gave me a long look. I think anything worth building is worth protecting, especially from the people who believe they're entitled to it. Her words landed like stone in a pond, quiet but unmistakable. I stood, stretching my fingers out of the fists I hadn't realized I'd made. Then let's protect it. The truth is, I didn't build Whispering Pines to escape anyone. I built it because I needed something that no one else could take credit for, something that wouldn't be rewritten in a group text or swept under a Thanksgiving table. Every nail I hammered, every log I sanded, it wasn't just construction, it was declaration. By the time I stepped outside, the rain had eased into mist, light enough to blur but not enough to soak. I pulled my coat tight and turned toward the Max station until I caught a flicker of movement across the street. Ryan. He was half-shadowed under the awning of a coffee shop, dressed for once in a proper coat. Standing beside him, a man in a charcoal suit held a thick folder, flipping through it while Ryan nodded and laughed, like someone who hadn't nearly burned through every ounce of goodwill our family ever gave him. I didn't move. I just watched. He looked up, just for a second, and saw me. His smile didn't flicker, not even a wince, like nothing was wrong. But something was. I wasn't asking anymore. His smile reminded me of a night 10 years ago when he showed up at my door in the rain with nothing but a duffel bag and a business plan printed at Kinko's. "I just need 10 grand to kickstart it," he'd said. "You'll double it in a year." I was still paying off the credit card I used to float that dream. And yet here he was again, still pitching, still charming, still pretending history didn't exist. As I turned away, the streetlights caught on the edge of the folder in the man's hands, something embossed in gold. Not a coincidence. Not anymore. I took a slow breath. The kind Grandma Whitman used to say, resets your spine. In this life, you can't always choose what family does to you, but you can choose who you become because of it. That day, I stopped being the buffer. I started being the boundary. My name was there, right above the date, neatly written in blue ink. Only, I hadn't written it. I had just stepped out of the shower, still wrapped in a towel, when the ping from my phone landed sharp and strange. It wasn't a message, not a calendar alert, just a dull ding from an inbox I rarely checked, my old personal email I used for spam and store discounts. The subject line read, "Sale completed, 24 Whispering Pines Lane." I didn't open it right away. I stood frozen in the middle of my apartment, the tile cold under my feet, a drop of water sliding down my spine. I knew the address. I knew the implication. But somehow, my mind couldn't compute both things at once. When I finally tapped it open, the email was short. Too short for something that life-changing, a generic message from Apex Realty with a PDF attached. "Congratulations on your recent transaction." My heart was thudding hard now. My hand, wet and shaking, tapped the file. There it was. My name, over and over, on a seller agreement, on a power of attorney form, initialed at the corners, signed in blue ink like someone thought that color would make it feel more legitimate. And for a second, just a second, I questioned my own memory. Had I signed anything? Some form? Some preliminary interest document? Then I saw the date. 3 days ago. The same day I was at Whispering Pines, stringing lights along the porch railings, sipping peppermint tea, watching frost curl at the edges of the lake. And that's when I knew. Not suspected. Knew. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. I called Savannah before I even dried my hair. "Check your email," I said. "Forwarding now." She didn't ask questions. 5 minutes later, I was back in her office, sitting across from her in jeans, damp boots, and a sweatshirt I'd thrown on in a panic. Savannah already had the documents open on her screen. "The metadata's inconsistent," she said, tapping through the file properties. "Whoever submitted this didn't use your device. The IP address traces back to an apartment building in Lake Oswego." I blinked. "That's where my parents live." She looked at me for a long second, then reached for another window on her monitor. "You installed the motion camera, right?" "Week ago. Set to auto-upload footage to the cloud." Smart. She clicked into the archive folder and pulled up the date listed on the forged documents. We sat in silence as the feed played. There was the inside of my office, the clean wooden desk, my filing cabinet slightly ajar. A figure moved past the frame, then backed up into view. Barbara. She was wearing one of her cashmere wraps, hair pinned back. Her posture was oddly stiff, her mouth set tight as she hovered over my desk. A moment later, Gregory stepped into view, glancing nervously toward the door. Savannah leaned forward. Barbara pulled a piece of paper from the top drawer, set it on the desk, and took a blue pen from her purse. She practiced once, twice, then again. And then the audio kicked in, a voice from off-screen. "Just do it. We're wasting time." Ryan. My body went still. I don't remember how long we sat there watching. At some point, Savannah stopped the video and turned to me. Her tone was careful, but her eyes were fire. "This isn't just forgery, Claire. This is fraud. Criminal-level fraud. And the POA document? That's a felony. We're not just undoing a sale. We're prosecuting a crime." My fingers were clenched in my lap, not shaking from fear this time, but something colder, something harder, rage. I could feel it building, not loud or explosive, but steady, controlled, the kind that doesn't pass, the kind that fuels. I thought about every time I'd been told to be the bigger person, every time my mother had said, "Family doesn't always make sense, Claire, but we make room." Every time Ryan had laughed off his mistakes like they were charm. They had stood in my home, rummaged through my desk, used my name like it was an access code, and smiled doing it. Savannah pushed a folder across the desk. Inside were preliminary filings, a complaint draft, and the start of a restraining order. "If we act fast," she said, "we can freeze the transaction before it finalizes at the county level, but you'll have to decide if you want this to go to court." I looked down at the papers, and I realized I wasn't tired. I wasn't afraid. I was done. "They're not my responsibility anymore," I said softly. They made that choice when they faked my signature. I met Savannah's eyes. "Let's do it right," I said. "I want them in court." It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the land. It was about something deeper, something that had been quietly unraveling since the day I said no to Ryan's pitch, and Barbara said I was hiding. This wasn't hiding. This was standing up. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone in that. Love makes you hesitate. Evidence doesn't. The courthouse smelled faintly of floor polish and burnt espresso, a strange blend of bureaucracy and fatigue. I walked through the cold marble lobby of the Multnomah County Courthouse, my boots echoing alongside Savannah's calm footsteps. It had been raining again. My coat was damp at the hem, but I didn't feel the chill. I felt something closer to steel. Savannah passed me a folder just before we stepped into the courtroom. "Stay steady. You don't need to perform, just be clear." I nodded. My fingers found the smooth edge of the chair in front of me as we sat. Across the aisle, Barbara adjusted her pearl earrings with precise hands. Gregory looked like he'd rather melt into the bench. Ryan smirked once, then pulled out his phone, thumbing through something invisible. The opposing counsel, Mark Rutledge, opened with charm. "Your Honor, the family context here is important. The defendant had long-standing financial involvement with her parents. There was no ill intent, just miscommunication." Savannah stood. "Miscommunication doesn't involve forged power of attorney documents, Your Honor." The judge's brow lifted. Rutledge stiffened. Savannah presented the LLC papers. This is Whispering Pines Retreat, LLC, registered under Claire Whitman, sole proprietor, filed December 6th. She moved to the footage. It played silently at first. Barbara entered Claire's cabin office. She moved slowly, eyes scanning shelves, then opened a drawer. Gregory hovered near the doorway, not speaking. Then the sound came in. Ryan's voice, unmistakable. "Just do it already." Barbara sat down, pulled out a pen, and practiced Claire's signature on a scrap paper, then again on the form. I didn't look at them. I watched the judge. His face remained unreadable. "Ms. Whitman," Savannah asked as I took the stand, "how did you learn of the sale?" "There was an email, no sender name, just a PDF. When I opened it, I saw my name. But it wasn't my hand. That signature wasn't mine." "And what did you feel, seeing that?" "I felt erased. Not just stolen, removed." Rutledge stood. "Isn't it true, Ms. Whitman, that you've financially supported your family before?" "Yes. I paid Ryan's bail in grad school. I co-signed for Dad's third property flip. I helped. That doesn't mean I agreed to surrender my home." "Home," he repeated, almost with amusement. I glanced at Barbara, then back at Rutledge. They didn't just take my property, they tried to take my place in it. The courtroom went still. Later, Mr. Whitaker took the stand. His voice cracked only once. "My wife and I sold our home to buy Whispering Pines. We thought we were buying peace. Now she can't sleep. She walks the house at night wondering if we're going to be evicted." Savannah nodded gently. "Thank you, Mr. Whitaker." The judge tapped his pen twice before speaking. "This court finds the power of attorney fraudulent. The sale is void. The case will be referred to the county prosecutor for criminal review." It was quiet as we stood. No outbursts, just the scrape of chairs and the sound of a life rebalancing. Outside in the hallway, Barbara brushed past me, eyes glassy. "You've ruined us," she hissed. I looked at her for what felt like the last time. "You did that the moment you picked Ryan over truth." Her face tightened. Her nails dug into the leather of her handbag. Gregory stayed behind, staring at the floor. Savannah leaned in as we walked. "You okay?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure yet. We passed through the lobby, the coffee cart still there, steam rising in ghostly curls. I bought a black coffee, more out of habit than need, and stood by the window watching the street. A news van was parked by the curb. The reporter glanced at me once, then at her cameraman. I turned away. Back in the car, I let the engine idle. Rain tapped the windshield like soft fingers. Savannah had said the rest would be procedure, but it didn't feel procedural. It felt like something inside me had been reset. I wasn't the daughter who flinched anymore. I wasn't the sister who lent. I wasn't even the woman defending her dream. I was someone else now, someone they couldn't reach. The morning light didn't crash in through the windows like it used to when I lived in the city. Out here, it crept slowly, glancing off the lake, sneaking through pine branches, settling gently on the cabin porch. I wrapped my hands around a chipped mug and stepped outside. The air still carried that crisp spring scent, a mix of wet earth and wildflowers. Across the water, a loon cried, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the ache of anything unfinished. I opened my journal to a clean page. My handwriting had softened over the years, looser now, more forgiving. I didn't write about the lawsuit, or the court dates, or the moment Barbara turned away as the verdict was read. That part of my life was over, etched into the court record, but not into this place. Instead, I wrote about the scent of cedar after rain and the way the wind curled around the retreat sign I painted by hand last week. Whispering Pines was mine again. The trail behind the cabin was still muddy from last night's rain. I tugged on boots and walked it anyway, watching sunlight catch on the edges of every fern. I passed the wooden bench Ryan once mocked as too rustic. I had carved it myself during my first winter here, sanding the edges until my fingers blistered. Funny how the things you build slowly with care hold up longer than the ones that come fast and flashy. At the clearing, I found the old fence post. the one that used to tilt like a bad mood. I'd pulled it out last summer. Today, I carried a small sapling in a cloth bag, the roots damp with hope. I dug the hole with steady hands and placed the young tree in the soil. It would grow taller than the fence ever did. A car door shut in the distance. I smiled. Back at the cabin, Aunt Linda stood on the porch holding a cherry pie like a peace offering. Her hair had gone fully silver, and she wore a denim jacket over her apron. "Your mom's still not speaking to me," she said, not as an apology, but as a statement of fact. "She's not speaking to a lot of people these days," I replied, holding the door open. We ate on the porch, warm pie melting over vanilla ice cream. Linda looked around and said, "You didn't just win, Claire. You chose better." Her words settled somewhere behind my ribs, deeper than pride. Maybe that's what healing sounded like, quiet affirmation from someone who never asked anything of me. My phone buzzed on the windowsill. Savannah's face filled the screen, hair tucked back, tea in hand. "You're fully booked for the next 2 weekends," she grinned. "You ready for that?" "I guess I better be," I said. "Do I need a bellhop?" "You've got charm. That's better," she winked. We chatted until her signal dropped, and I tucked the phone back inside. I still had work to do, beds to make, welcome baskets to fill. I'd written handwritten notes for each guest, folded fresh linen, lit a lavender candle in every room. By early afternoon, the first guests arrived, a couple with a 6-year-old daughter and too many bags. I greeted them at the gravel path. The little girl looked up at the cabin, then at me. "Is this your house?" "No," I said, smiling. "It's more than that." They settled in. Laughter began floating through the air again, the good kind, the kind that didn't come at anyone's expense. I walked past the guest book on my way back to the kitchen. A new entry caught my eye, the Whitakers. I hadn't expected them back. The note read, "Thank you for making this place feel safe again. We sleep through the night now." I pressed my fingers to the page, just lightly. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something close to peace. That night, I sat by the fireplace, blanket wrapped around my shoulders, journal on my lap. The flames cracked and hummed as I wrote. They forged my name to steal what I built. But they only strengthened what they couldn't take. Me. The wind shifted outside. I let it in. Some people think justice comes with noise and headlines. For me, it came in the quiet, when a child asked if this cabin was mine, and I could finally say yes without fear. Sometimes the people who raise you also fail you, but that doesn't mean you have to carry their choices forever. In this life, peace doesn't always come from making others understand. Sometimes it comes from letting go and choosing to rebuild where love feels real. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear what it reminded you of. Your thoughts, your memories. Sometimes they're the first step to healing, too. And if this story spoke to you and you believe in quiet victories, personal growth, and stories that matter, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's so much more ahead, and I'd be honored to share it with you.